Welcome to Unprecedented Journey. I'm Jeff Oppenheim, your host. At this point, we're well into the coronavirus quarantine, and many of us are probably feeling a wee bit anxious, not only about the present, but also about what the future might hold. And as I began to think about it for myself, I could think of no better person to speak to than a gentleman I've known for a while. He's an author. He wrote this book, Changin Your Game Plan, How I Used Incarceration as a Stepping Stone for Success. His name is Randy Kearse. Randy, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's jump right in here, and let me ask you to take us on your journey from incarceration to publication.
I mean, it wasn't so pleasant back in the days. Was formerly incarcerated. I did 15 years in federal prison for drug crime back in the 90s. I spent from 1992 to 2005 in federal prison. If I had to add it up, I'd say totally I spent about 30 years of my life in and out of the revolving door of the criminal justice system.
How long have you been out now?
I've been out for 15 years. Been somewhat successful in my endeavors. I've written several books. One of the books that I'm most known for is called Changin Your Game Plan, How I Used Incarceration as a Stepping Stone for Success.
Let me ask you this, Randy. From your experience having been formerly incarcerated, are you feeling any of the same anxieties we are, or feeling cooped up or locked into our houses and apartments? Or because of your past experience, you've been able to already acclimate to this?
It's ironic that some of the things that I experienced while I was incarcerated are literally manifesting themselves as we're going through this coronavirus crisis.
Like what, for example?
When it comes to being isolated, when it comes to being separated from people, and just the general fear of getting sick and not being able to have the proper medical attention, or the possibility of catching some type of underlying virus.
So give us some guidelines. How do we begin to cope with this, let's call it a lockdown of sorts? And for that matter, how do we start to give over to it and abide by the new rules?
If you have not been incarcerated, it's really kind of hard for you to really let the fact sink in that you're limited in your movements.
It's a period of adjustment, no?
It's not as stringent as when you're incarcerated, but I mean, it falls along the same lines of monitoring your movements. Everybody's flow is pretty much disrupted, so you have to get used to doing things different.
How long did it take for you to adjust to your reality?
It took me almost 2 weeks to kind of figure out my footing because I was used to doing certain things. I had a routine. But for me also, what is more pressing is the uncertainty of what the future is going to bring.
So walk us through your process, entering the system and then being able to manifest change.
Okay, I went to prison. The behaviors, the attitudes, the mindset that I had when I got to prison. Okay, I'm going to be in prison for 15 years. I got there, maybe the first 2 or 3 years, I'm here, I'm going with the flow. I'm not really paying attention to what the future is going to hold because it seems so far away. But as I started getting more into the time, I started really reflecting on, man, you're going home one day.
How did you motivate yourself under those circumstances?
When I was incarcerated, man, motivation, it was hard to come by sometimes, to be totally honest with you. You're surrounded by people, 1,000 guys who are not really the most happiest campers in the world, you know what I'm saying? So they waking up miserable, they got issues with their family, their girlfriends, their wives, and then here you come talking about the future. I want to do this, I want to do that. You dealing with people whose outlook on the future is so bleak that you don't even want to share the things that you want to do when you get out, because it's going to go into, you're going to put that energy into people who really not even on that mindset.
So how'd you deal with it? What's your advice to us?
You push through the doubt. You push through it. You be like, yo, I'm going to make it work because I ain't got no choice. You know what I'm saying? Like, the last 30 days of my incarceration was like, okay, you're scared, you're nervous, whatever, but you ain't got no choice because the alternative is to do something messed up, make a bad decision, and come back.
You're saying we really have to use this time productively. Write that new resume because we may need it, or learn a new skill, or write that novel or book, to follow your example, that you've been talking about writing for the last 10, 20 years. In other words, we've got to use this lockdown as an opportunity to manifest change in ourselves.
Either you're going to use your time productively or you're going to waste your time, and then when this thing finally resolves itself, you're going to be stuck behind the 8 ball, because no matter what nobody tell you, life is not going to be the same.
So I guess ultimately that's why you and this book is sort of perfect timing right now, isn't it?
My book, Changin Your Game Plan, is just not for people who are incarcerated physically. It's for people who are incarcerated mentally, emotionally, financially, and and it's relevant for this crisis, because it's not so much about prison, it's about overcoming adversity. It's about living up to this challenge of, can I overcome whatever obstacles is placed in my way? And that's what we're all faced with, that question right now. How do I overcome this obstacle? No matter how bad it gets, no matter how bleak it gets, can I rise to the occasion to overcome this adversity and put some type of life together again for myself, where I can find happiness, I can find peace, and I can live a decent life? Because I would say live a normal life, but ain't nothing normal after this, man.
No, that is true. Well, Randy, where do we find your book? How do we get your book?
If people want to pick up the book, they can go to my website, www.randykearse.com. And yeah, they can get my books there. They can get them on Amazon or where any books are sold.
Randy, thanks again. And thanks for the book. It is absolutely a perfect read right now. Any last words of advice, though?
I'm going to give you a little advice, and then I'm going to give you some street advice. Try not to get too depressed. Try not to, consume everything that's going on. Find a place for yourself. Find a safe place for yourself, for your mental and emotional state. And as we say in the penitentiary and in the streets, it gets greater later.
Well, thank you again, Randy. Appreciate you being here. And thank all of you for joining us as well for what is now our second broadcast of Unprecedented Journey. If you like what you see here, please be sure to hit subscribe. I'll also be sure to post the information about ordering Randy's books on the same site. Please share, a comment, pass it along on social media, and also tune in next week when we do another episode of Unprecedented Journey. And in the meantime, stay safe and stay well.